Constitution. So we'll introduce ourselves, have you introduce yourself and your teacher, and then turn to the question. My name is Joe Stewart. I teach in the Political Science Department at Clemson University in South Carolina.
I'm Jack Barlow. I'm a professor of politics here at Juniata College in Pennsylvania.
I'm Tim Moore, and I'm from the Center for the Study of the American Constitution at the University of Wisconsin. Go Badgers.
Okay, please introduce yourselves.
Sorry, I had to get that in there, sorry.
Thank you for allowing us to testify before you today. We're the Black River We the People team from Holland, Michigan. My name is Elijah LeBurn. I'm a junior and I'm on units 2 and 4.
My name is Ariana Newberry. I'm a junior and I'm on units 2 and 5.
My name is Nathan Overweg. I am a senior and I'm the captain of unit 2. And our coach is Peter Letzman, assisted by Luke Ryder.
Great, well, thank you. It's always good to see people from Holland. I have a colleague who went to Hope College, and I have a former colleague at another institution who's a Hope College graduate. So I am aware of Holland, Michigan.
Lake Macatawa.
Pardon?
Lake Macatawa.
Oh, I'm not that familiar with it.
Captain
Okay.
Sunday.
Yeah. Okay, no surprise, we're looking at question 1 in unit 2. I'll read the question and then we'll listen to your response. The states sent delegates to the Philadelphia Convention to join with other states, quote, in devising and discussing all such alterations and further provisions as may be necessary to render the federal Constitution adequate to the exigencies of the Union, unquote. To what extent, if any, did the delegates follow their instructions? What experiences of state governments under their new constitutions after independence might have influenced the creation of the Constitution? Do the decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court function as a continuing constitutional convention? Why or why not? You may proceed.
Washington wrote that we cannot exist long as a nation without having a power which will pervade the whole Union in as energetic a manner as the authority of the state governments. Americans were convinced that the perpetual union they had fought for was on the brink of collapse.
Unfortunately, the framers had little democratic precedent to base a new constitution on. They had no choice but to look to their home states for inspiration and were often disappointed. The state constitutions, driven by the spirit of '76, allowed for arbitrary governance. Tyranny of the majority was rampant and laws were constantly subject to public whim.
Pennsylvania's constitution, with its unicameralism and lack of executive, instituted majoritarian legislative supremacy. In Federalist 48, Madison decried this impetuous vortex of power, supporting the checks and balances necessary to achieve limited government.
A constitutional model of checks and balances, as well as separation of powers, was seen in Massachusetts. With a bicameral legislature, effective executive, and independent judiciary, the Massachusetts state constitution can be seen as a blueprint for the Madisonian model.
However, Shays's rebellion, caused in part by flaws in Massachusetts' scheme of representation, exposed the frailty of the Articles of Confederation. An attempt at reform was made with the Annapolis Convention, but only 5 states bothered to participate. Appalled, Madison and Hamilton rallied their fellow delegates to meet again with proper authority.
At this Philadelphia convention, the delegates did not follow their instructions to merely amend the articles. However, their actions, though technically beyond their purview, were justified. In Federalist 40, Madison compares the revolutionary actions of the Continental Congress to the framers. In both cases, a lack of zeal for adhering to ordinary forms was excused by the Union itself being at stake. Decisive action had to be taken.
The Anti-Federalists questioned both the necessity and legitimacy of such dramatic change. The convention was called for the sole and express purpose of revising the articles, and had no right to propose such a magnitude of reform. It is radical, Patrick Henry argued. Our rights and privileges are endangered.
But Federalists dismissed these concerns. Madison argued direct ratification by the people themselves would blot out antecedent errors and irregularities. The continued mandate of the people is the only way a constitution can stand the test of time.
But the founders did not want this new constitution to be treated with what Thomas Jefferson described as a sanctimonious reverence, too sacred to be touched. Thus, the Article 5 amendment process allows for the state legislatures and Congress, representatives of the people, to propose amendments.
However, the amendment process in practice is unrealistic. The 27 amendments have not kept pace with the progress of the human mind, as Jefferson desired, and so alternative means have been found. With their power of judicial review established in Marbury v. Madison, the courts increasingly took on the task of constitutional change.
From dramatic expansions of the Commerce Clause in Wickard v. Filburn to the virtual invention of rights under substantive due process, the court has, in the words of Justice Hugo Black, become, in effect, a continuously functioning constitutional convention.
Instead of 2/3 of both houses of Congress and 3/4 of the states, the amendment process today seems to only take 5/9 of the Supreme Court. Thank you. We are now ready for your questions.
Well, thank you. You mentioned the ratification process and the call for direct ratification. How different was the composition of the group that ratified versus those that wrote the Constitution among the founding fathers?
Well, I think it's important to look at the delegates at the Philadelphia Convention. They were mainly Federalists and people who supported models of checks and balances and infiltration of talent because they believed that the common man was not, wouldn't be able to govern the people. And the people who were actually going to be ratifying this Constitution were very different and had different beliefs than the framers in Philadelphia.
At the Philadelphia,
You can see the
Sorry,
vast
go ahead.
majority of the public was actually anti-federalist, and this made it extremely difficult for ratifying because it was indirectly up to the people. It was the state legislatures, and although not every state initially ratified, it was ratified by the majority of them.
in addition to that, at the Philadelphia conventions, each state sent its own delegates, whereas at the state ratifying conventions, the states would decide how they would pick their delegates, whether the state governments would decide them or whether they would hold an election for them.
Okay. So you talked about tyranny of the majority. You talk about some of the things that the states have done. And you seem unconcerned with the fact that the framers disregarded the mandate. So I'm wondering, is this a coup by the minority, a revolution where the minority of the American people decide that they're going to make a constitution that works for them and the heck with everybody else?
Well, I think it's important to look at their form of government at the time. They had a failing form of government and they needed change to happen. They had a executive that virtually had no power, and they had a form of taxation that wasn't really a form of taxation, it was optional. So they needed change.
In addition to the system of requisitions, Article 13 in the Articles of Confederation required unanimity among every state in the Articles to amend the Articles. This allowed, with all these combinations, this allowed state governments to completely run unchecked.
But yes, I do. I believe that we can see in some aspects of our government that it is, as you said, a coup. We see that the property requirements in the different state legislatures and the separate Madison's checks and balances and separation of powers in Federalist 51 only proves that there was an idea of the framers to keep the power to themselves.
I have a question about the anti-federalist critiques of the convention itself. And you've kind of referenced them a little bit, but I'd like to flesh that out a little bit more. Of all of the criticisms that they had regarding the convention, which would resonate to you most?
I think secrecy. The secrecy of the convention was one of the biggest criticisms that I think resonates most with me, because this government is supposed to be for the people. How are the people supposed to ratify a document that they had no say in writing?
I think one of the most important aspects that we can look at is the fact that they believe that a new constitution would actually get rid of some of the rights of the people. And we can see a quote from George Clinton where he says that the feebleness of the Confederation does not drive the people to the adoption of dangerous to our liberties. This is extremely important because people are, they believe that people were losing rights that they were, if they had a new constitution.
Do you think it was fair to criticize the convention if Washington or Franklin are there?
I think it's fair to criticize the circumstances when it comes to the secrecy aspect of the convention when you look at it from a surface level. But if you delve deeper, I think you can look to the aspects in which the Articles of Confederation absolutely had to change because they were working against the minority, with states executing a tyranny of the majority.
Okay.
You've taken a position on the court serving as a continuing constitutional convention. Do other branches, such as the legislative branch or the executive branch, do anything that's similar to that?
As we see that the court has begun to take control of this, in charge of constitutional change, I believe that this we can credit to some lack of action in the legislature. We also see that the executive has been making more executive orders as we see less action in Congress. So this can be part of that constitutional change.
In addition to that, we can see that the legislature is allowed to go above and beyond what the court has established. And one of these examples would be RFRA, protecting religious freedoms.
Say a little bit more about that, would you please?
Yeah.
Well, in Employment Division v. Smith, we see that the court ruled against. May I please finish my statement?
Yeah, finish that sentence.
Sure.
Yes. In Employment Division v. Smith, we see that the court ruled against religious exemptions, giving them so willingly, and we see that Congress decided to go around the Supreme Court ruling by passing the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or RFRA, in order to go above and beyond and protect these First Amendment rights.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you.